Hi all, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the calibration procedure you'll use for your FCP172A. This is the Windows calibration I'll start with, and many sims will require you to do this. In the search you can type Joy and set up USB game controllers. And that'll bring you your game controllers menu. Select your FCP172 from the list and go into Properties. And as we exercise the controls, you'll see that they don't all go from 0 to 100%. This is because the potentiometers don't necessarily have the same range of motion as the control itself. I tried to make them as realistic as possible, and therefore the controls will have sometimes less movement than the potentiometers. So you'll see that we need to calibrate them so that we can get the full range of motion when we go into our sim. So if you just go into the settings and the calibration menu, the first one will be the trim wheel. This is the FCP trim, and you'll notice that it actually goes all the way from top to the bottom because we do use the full range of the potentiometer in this one. So we don't really need to change anything on this one, but just go to the top and bottom just to make sure the calibration routine knows where the top and bottom are. And you can click on Next. Then we will be doing our carb heat, also known as anti-ice in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Don't go all the way, go to the ends of the stroke, but don't push the little buttons at the ends, so don't give it that extra push. And then the throttle, you'll notice, goes from about 15% to 85% because it's a 100 millimeter potentiometer, and we're only using 70 millimeters of that range. The mixture actually uses the full range of the potentiometer, which is 60 millimeters. And then the flaps doesn't quite go all the way to the top and the bottom either. So when you exercise that and you finish the calibration, you'll notice when we move the controls, now they go to from 0 to 100%. So this is the Windows calibration menu. And we should be complete. We notice that we go all the way to the top and bottom on those. So I just wanted to take a moment to show you the back of the FCP172. It's got a couple of connectors on it. The USB Mini B connector is what we plug into our computer. The trim wheel, if you have the FCP trim, the trim wheel will plug into here. And then we have a couple of jumpers on here. This is because the FCP172 has a carb heat that is both an analog control and a digital control. And the same thing with the flaps. There's an analog control and there's also a digital control. On the carb heat, we use a 60 millimeter potentiometer, but the stroke of the shaft actually only goes 50 millimeters. And for some flight sims, and most flight sims really, that I've seen, you can use an analog carb heat and it will adjust, from 0 to 100%. But others, and particularly Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, does not have an analog carb heat. It only has digital, and it's called anti-ice, and it's either on or it's off. So there's switches at the ends of the stroke that if you push it just a little bit at the end and pull it just a little bit at the end, you'll feel the little click of the switches to turn it on and off. So you can set it up so that both analog and digital are functioning, and most of the time that's fine. But there could be an occasion where you want only the analog or only the digital, and in that case you'll just adjust these jumpers per the little diagram here. If you want analog only, then you'll move this jumper to the middle. If you want digital only, then you'll move this jumper to the middle. I'm going to leave those as they are for now because they're really not, it's really not necessary to disable them. You can use both. Now, the flaps is a little bit different. I use an encoder that gives you basically 4 positions on the flaps. You've got all the way up, down 1, down 2, down 3. Which is all the way down, and then back up. So you've got 4 positions on that encoder, and there's actually 3. You'll see in the when we go calibrate it, you can see those spots, and I can adjust. I'll adjust it so that so you can see those spots when we look at it. But anyways, to show you how to move these jumpers, they're simple PCB jumpers that we just have to grab onto it with something sharp. You might even be able to get your fingernails in there. I sometimes can, but I just cut my fingernails, so they're not really long enough. Basically, we'll move that and move it to the center, and what that does is that disables that analog port. And if we wanted to conversely disable the analog port and use digital only, we could move that there and then move the analog jumper over. They're a little tight. Be careful not to lose them. The good thing is if you lose them, they're pretty cheap to replace. Put that on the middle, and that way now it's digital only. I'll move that back. And in order to calibrate this properly, we're going to need to make this analog only. Alright, so anyways, that's how we enable and disable those jumpers. So I also wanted to show you the effect it will have if you don't disable the digital ports on the flaps control when you're doing the calibration procedure. As you are about to see, as you move the flaps through their range of motion, you'll get button presses on 1 and 2, and what this will do is this will tell the calibration routine that you want to go to the next step, which will prevent you from completing the calibration on that axis. Okay, so let's go ahead into Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 and go into the controls options. Select the Gear-Falcon FCP172A and bring up our controls. Now, if you're setting this up for the first time, it may not have these controls listed. You may have to go into the search and search for, like anti-ice and elevator trim and that sort of thing. Once you've assigned them, they'll show up. So first of all, we've set our anti-ice to buttons 3 and 4. So we push in the control until it depresses the buttons at the ends of the travel. Next thing we'll do is check the elevator trim axis. You see that we go all the way from the bottom to the top of the range of motion. And to assign that, if you haven't assigned it yet, I'll clear it for you. And then you just click on Start Scanning, and you just move the control. You may have to move it a couple turns because it needs quite a bit of motion to know that you've moved it. And once you've moved it, you don't be concerned if the slider doesn't move. Because there seems to be a bug in this program where after you assign the slider or the control, it doesn't move. But if you go into the sensitivity menu, you can move it and you'll see it moving, so you know that it works. Also, if you apply and save, get out of the menu and then come back in, you may find that the slider's working again. So it seems to be a little bug in the controls assignment menu. And you can see now the slider's moving again when we move the control. So we'll move the flaps. That seems to work. And we'll do the same thing for this control. Go into the control. I'm going to just clear it and click on Start Scanning and just move it, and it will detect the motion. And validate it. And again, you can see that the slider's now not moving. Just that bug rearing its ugly head again. Not to worry though, it will still work. Next thing we'll do is check the throttle, move it in and out. Check the sensitivity to make sure it really is moving, and yes, indeed it is. And again, to assign this control, we'll simply click on the control. I'm going to clear it, and then we'll scan and move it, and it will detect it. Then we can validate. Now if you go into the sensitivity menu, you'll notice that it doesn't go all the way to the top and bottom. Even though we calibrated it in the Windows menu, Microsoft Flight Simulator ignores that calibration. So we need to go in here and change the extremity dead zone. And basically you just move that until the ball is at the top and bottom when the control is all the way in and all the way out. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you can adjust it a little bit until it's just where you want it to be. And that way you'll get from 0% to 100% motion when you're in the cockpit. And I'm doing the same thing here with the mixture control, which the mixture control you don't really need to adjust the dead zone because it already uses the full potentiometer. The carb heater, anti-ice, actually doesn't use the full range either, although Microsoft Flight Sim doesn't recognize the analog control, so we have to use buttons for that anyways. We'll do the same thing with the trim control. We don't really need to adjust the dead zone because it does go all the way to the top and bottom of the potentiometer. It uses the full range. We might want to adjust the centering though. If we move the wheel so it indicates center, then we can adjust the neutral position so that it lines up with the middle range. And then lastly, we're going to lastly we're going to adjust the sensitivity of the mixture. We'll do the same thing with that. We'll select the control, validate it, and then we've actually already checked the sensitivity, so I don't think we need to do that again. Now flaps, we need to adjust the sensitivity on the flaps. You'll have to scroll down because it's actually down below the other ones. But this slider X doesn't go all the way to the top and bottom, so we'll need to check the or set the extremity dead zone on this one as well. Alright, we can apply and save, and we are basically done. We can go into the cockpit next and take a look at our controls. So I'm going to go ahead and exercise the controls here in the cockpit. You'll notice when I move the carb heat or anti-ice in and out, it doesn't follow the analog control because, again, Microsoft Flight Simulator only uses an on-off control, so we're using digital for that. The throttle, once we loosen the tension on the thing, we can move the throttle in and out all the way. We'll do the same thing with the mixture control and the flaps control. And then finally the trim control for the elevator trim. You can see it moving up and down in time with the motion of the trim wheel. I'll zoom in a little bit, and in case you couldn't see it very well before. One thing to note, if you're using autopilot, the trim will go to whatever you set it at. When you engage autopilot, it will move the trim, but the physical wheel won't move, so that when you disengage autopilot, the trim is going to go snap back to wherever you had it set before. So if you use autopilot a lot, you might not want to use this analog trim in your sim. The flaps control actually has an option to disengage the detents. Right now I have the detents set, but you can disengage the detents and you can actually move this flaps control in smaller increments from 0 to 100% rather than snapping to the locations that it has in the cockpit. And that's it. Thank you for watching.